"It's not compliant, Mr. Vance. You'll need to take it down." The words hit Adam Vance harder than he expected. Not because they were loud, Cheryl Buckley, the HOA chair, delivered them with her usual passive-aggressive smile, but because they didn't make sense. Adam stood at the edge of his backyard, the sun casting long shadows over the freshly mowed lawn. Behind him sat the swing set, powder-coated steel frame, vinyl seat harness, soft rubber mulch beneath. It wasn't a hand-me-down, it wasn't some clunky wooden eyesore. It was custom-built for his daughter. From the patio window, you could see Sophie, 10 years old, head of auburn curls pulled into a messy ponytail, legs tucked carefully into her lightweight pediatric wheelchair, watching. She didn't know what the clipboard meant, but she knew her swing was the only place she felt free. And now someone in khakis and loafers had shown up to tell her dad it didn't comply. Adam turned slowly toward Cheryl. Comply with what? Section 8. Paragraph 3 of our neighborhood standards. All recreational structures must be pre-approved, not visible above the 6-foot fence line, and made of materials that match the architectural tone of the home. He blinked. It's a swing. It's an unsanctioned structure. It's for my daughter. Cheryl didn't flinch. I understand, and I sympathize, but that's not the issue. The structure exceeds the allowed height by 14 inches and was not submitted for review. You should have filed a request. It was installed with a grant. We filed everything with the city. This isn't about the city. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. This is about Brookridge Park HOA, and we expect the same rules for everyone. Adam clenched his jaw but didn't speak. He knew how this worked. This wasn't about the swing set. This was about control. The day Sophie's neurologist said the word permanent, Adam had promised her 2 things. 1, they'd never treat her like she was broken. 2, he'd find a way to make her feel like she could still fly. The swing wasn't just recreation. It was therapy, freedom. It was the only place she didn't need ramps, lifts, or supervision. Just the wind, her harness, and that soft lopsided grin she got when the sun hit her face mid-swing. And now Cheryl Buckley, whose biggest concern was which shade of beige counted as earth tone, wanted it gone. That night, Adam stood in the backyard after Sophie had gone to bed, hands in his hoodie pockets, eyes on the swing. It wasn't even that tall. The fence blocked it from street view. It wasn't loud. It wasn't ugly. It wasn't hurting anyone. But it had. You said it didn't match the neighborhood's tone. You said it wasn't compliant with the community aesthetic. What you didn't say, what you never asked, is who it was built for. He pulled a photo from the folder, held it up. Sophie, in her harness, grinning mid-swing, hair flying, her wheelchair sitting empty at the edge of the mulch. My daughter has never run through a playground. She's never gone down a slide without help. But this swing, that's hers. And for 3 minutes a day, she feels like every other kid on this block. No one moved. No one coughed. Just quiet. And clarity. Cheryl straightened her papers but didn't look up. Mr. Vance, the board has procedures. I followed procedures. You didn't. He tapped the packet. You issued a non-compliance notice without verifying the permits. You didn't review the ADA exceptions. And you didn't even ask for clarification before trying to remove something legally protected under federal law. He scanned the crowd. And the worst part, you tried to frame it as fairness, as if enforcing a rule blindly is more important than showing a child dignity. Someone near the back muttered, "Damn right." A neighbor, Michelle Langston, from 2 doors down, stood up next. I'm not on the board. I've never spoken at one of these. But I've seen that swing, and I've seen that little girl, and I'd rather live next to joy than a perfectly matched fence. Another voice rose. You fined me last year for a birdbath, Cheryl, but you went after a disabled child's swing without blinking. Now the tide was moving. This wasn't just Adam's fight anymore. It was everyone's reckoning. The board murmured behind the table. Cheryl glanced at the others, but no one spoke. Finally, Elise, soft-spoken but clear, leaned into the mic. I'd like to motion we rescind the non-compliance notice issued to Lot 19, effective immediately. It was seconded before Cheryl could respond. The vote passed unanimously. Even Cheryl raised her hand, but she didn't look happy. She looked exposed. Adam didn't thank them. He didn't need their permission. He just nodded once, then added one last line. You don't get to call it supporting all families if the first thing you do is tear down the only place a kid like mine gets to feel normal. Then he sat down. The room didn't clap. It didn't need to, because it wasn't over yet. But it was starting to change. The swing stayed up, but the pressure didn't go down. By the following Monday, Adam received 2 letters from the HOA in his mailbox. One marked "You are gent," the other "For your record." Neither mentioned the swing. Not directly. The first warned him that his grass exceeded neighborhood standards of uniformity in certain patches along the rear fence. The second reminded him that leaving his trash bins visible from the street for more than 6 hours violated community guidelines. Both were signed by Cheryl Buckley. He didn't take the bait. He cut the grass. He rolled the bins into the garage like always. But this wasn't about violations. This was about control. About the kind of person who loses once and then scrambles to win at something else, anything, no matter how petty. 2 days later, he overheard a conversation at the mailbox. 2 board members whispering. If he wanted sympathy, there were better ways to get it. You saw the meeting. He ambushed Cheryl. We can't let every yard become a therapy center just because someone plays the emotion card. They stopped talking when they saw him. Didn't apologize. Didn't look ashamed. Just awkward. Like they weren't sorry about what they said, only that they got caught. That night, Adam sat at the dining table with his laptop open, the same manila folder beside him but now fatter, thicker with screenshots, recordings, time-stamped emails. The retaliation wasn't loud, but it was documented. He didn't want to push it, but he would, because Cheryl Buckley wasn't just trying to save face. She was trying to make an example out of him, and by extension Sophie. That couldn't happen. Not in this neighborhood. Not anywhere. He emailed Elena Grant from the Disability Council again, attached the HOA letters, the audio clip from the mailbox, even a screenshot of a recent Facebook post in the neighborhood group from Cheryl's close friend. We must protect consistency in our community. If one person bends the rules, the structure breaks down. No names, no photos. But again, everyone knew. Elena replied the same night. I'm forwarding this to the local ADA liaison. You have grounds for a discrimination complaint, not just for the swing, but for targeted retaliation after a protected accommodation was upheld. You think I should escalate? I think it's time they remembered what the A in ADA stands for. The following week, Adam sent a letter, this time from a law firm. It was short, 3 pages, calm, but thorough. It laid out the HOA's unlawful attempt to remove a therapeutic swing, their failure to account for ADA-protected accommodations, their continued pattern of harassment after a public correction, and a formal request for Cheryl Buckley to step down from the board pending an ethics review. The letter didn't threaten a lawsuit. It didn't scream, but it carried weight. And by Thursday, people were talking. Cheryl called an emergency board session. She didn't invite Adam, but Elise did. You should come, she said over the phone. Just listen. I think she's going to try and shift the narrative again, and you deserve to be in the room. Adam didn't hesitate. That night the clubhouse felt colder. Fewer residents showed up, but those who did came with arms crossed, lips tight, eyes focused. Cheryl began with a speech. Polished, rehearsed. In light of recent events, and the intense emotions surrounding accessibility and policy enforcement, I want to take a moment to clarify that my intentions have always been centered around fairness, she continued. I've served this board for 9 years. I've worked hard to ensure our community remains safe, structured, and beautiful. I regret any miscommunication that may have caused division, but what she never said, not once, that she was wrong. Not about the swing. Not about the letters. Not about the girl in the harness, who just wanted to fly. When she finished, the room didn't clap. Adam stood quietly from the back and raised his hand. Cheryl hesitated, then nodded. "I'm not here to fight," he said. "But I want to be very clear. This wasn't about miscommunication. It was about the refusal to see someone who doesn't fit the mold. Someone who isn't standard. Someone who doesn't match your version of what belongs." He let the silence stretch. "This isn't about me. It's about the next parent who builds something different. The next child who doesn't walk like yours. The next neighbor who asks for space, not pity." He held up the legal notice. "And this was my last warning. The next one comes from the Office for Civil Rights." He placed it on the table, turned, and walked out. No dramatics, no shouting, just truth, and the sound of one gate, slowly, steadily, closing behind him. On Wednesday morning, Adam opened his email and found something new in his inbox. Not from Cheryl, not from the HOA board. It was from a name he didn't recognize. The subject line read, "Question about your swing set. Parent at Crestview Elementary." The message inside was short, but it hit like a punch to the ribs. "Hi Mr. Vance. I hope this isn't intrusive. My son is in the same grade as Sophie. We overheard 2 other parents at drop-off yesterday talking about a dispute in your neighborhood. They said the swing set was a publicity stunt, that you used your daughter's disability to win an argument. Just wanted to say, we support you, but I thought you should know what's being said." Adam read it twice, then a third time. His stomach burned not from the content, but from the familiarity of it. This wasn't just about bylaws anymore. Cheryl had taken the fight beyond the board. That afternoon, he logged into the Brookridge community group, the closed Facebook forum moderated by Cheryl and 2 of her friends. The top post had been shared 15 times. It read, "The real issue isn't accessibility, it's that process was ignored, and emotions were used to override rules meant to protect everyone. If we want to protect the structure of our community, we can't let exceptions become expectations." There were no names, but there didn't have to be. Dozens of residents had seen Sophie's photo on Adam's shared post the week before. The same photo he used at the meeting. The same one neighbors had quietly thanked him for sharing. Now Cheryl's circle was twisting it, casting it as manipulation. He scrolled through the comments. Mary's too. Some offered vague support. Most stayed silent, but one comment stood out. "If that swing set stays, anyone can build anything and call it therapeutic." That was the game now. Strip the story of its soul. Turn Sophie from a child into a loophole. Adam didn't post a rebuttal. He didn't comment or message anyone. Instead, he went back to his folder. He reopened the audio file from the mailbox conversation, the HOA violations that had arrived in the weeks after the hearing, and the new emails he'd received from other families who had stayed quiet until now. 3 of them, all with children who had invisible disabilities, had similar stories. One was told her son's sensory tent looked like a camping structure and had to be taken down. Another had been asked to remove a therapy ramp because it disrupted curb appeal. The third had been warned about a trampoline, even though it was specifically prescribed for vestibular therapy. They all happened under Cheryl's board, and none had ever been challenged. Until now. That night, Adam called his contact at the Office for Civil Rights. He had been holding off, but now, this wasn't about one swing, it was a pattern. He compiled everything. He filed the complaint. He listed every name, timestamp, and quote he had. He didn't tell the HOA. He told the city, and the city forwarded it to the state ADA Compliance Commission. 2 days later, Cheryl received a formal notice of inquiry. The HOA board received a copy, and Adam, he received silence, which for the first time since this started, was the loudest response yet. That weekend, a new letter appeared in his mailbox. This time, it wasn't from the board. It was signed by 5 residents, all of them parents, none of them previously vocal. They wrote, "You stood up when most of us stayed quiet. You weren't wrong. And now that the curtain's down, we're with you. We've requested an emergency vote to recall Cheryl from the board." It was happening. Not because Adam had demanded it, but because he had shown them what silence allows. On Sunday, Cheryl tried one last play. She sent out an email blast with the subject line, "Let's stop the division, rebuild together." Inside, she called for unity, blamed misinformation, and warned against mob mentality threatening the integrity of our neighborhood. But no one bought it, because this wasn't about division, it was about exposure, and Cheryl wasn't being attacked. She was being revealed. On the first Tuesday of the month, Cheryl Buckley walked into the HOA board meeting like she always did, heels clicking, folder tucked under one arm, expression tight but composed. But this time, something was different. People didn't make space for her as she passed. They didn't look at her with polite deference, or even forced smiles. They just stared, some from their chairs, some from the back wall, arms folded, and some didn't look at her at all. Because they weren't here for her anymore. They were here for what came next. The room had more people than usual, many of them first-timers. Some had never cared about HOA meetings before, but something about this one brought them out of their kitchens, off their porches, and into the fluorescent-lit clubhouse to finally see who was really running things. Adam sat near the front, folder closed on his lap. He hadn't come to speak this time. He didn't need to. Elise Myers, acting president since the complaint was filed, opened the meeting with a calm announcement. "Before we begin tonight's regular agenda, we're going to address the formal petition submitted by residents regarding board member Cheryl Buckley." Cheryl's eyes narrowed. "I wasn't notified of any petition." Elise held up the paper. "Per HOA bylaws, no notification is required before presenting a community-led recall request. 28 signatures. That exceeds the minimum by 9. A low murmur passed through the room. Someone near the back said, "About time." Cheryl didn't move, but she didn't speak either. Elise continued, her voice steady. "This isn't a disciplinary hearing. This is a community decision. The recall vote will be held in 2 weeks, as outlined in Section 6.1 of our charter. Until then, all board communications will be reviewed by a second officer for transparency." Then she looked directly at Cheryl. "You're still a resident here. You're still welcome, but the board no longer belongs to you." Cheryl's face stayed perfectly still, not defensive, not apologetic, just pale. She folded her folder tighter under her arm, and slowly sat down without saying another word. And for the first time in a long time, she looked small. Outside the clubhouse, things shifted quickly. The community page, once tightly moderated, opened up. Residents started sharing their own HOA horror stories. Old grievances were revisited. New conversations started about how rules were enforced selectively. Some posts were deleted, but screenshots spread faster than controls could stop them. Someone posted a picture of Sophie's swing, now decorated with a rainbow pinwheel, and a handmade sign that read, "This is what community looks like." The post had more likes than any HOA announcement in the group's history. That weekend, a neighbor Adam barely knew knocked on his door. Middle-aged. Baseball cap. Nervous posture. "Hey, I just wanted to say something." Adam stepped outside. "Go ahead." "I didn't vote last time. For board stuff, I mean. Didn't think it mattered. But I watched the meeting. And your girl, she's why I'm voting now." He nodded, almost embarrassed by his own words. Adam shook his hand. "Thanks for telling me." Sophie didn't know any of this. She didn't see the petition. She didn't hear the vote timeline. or the layers of policy unraveling behind closed doors. She only noticed that more kids stopped to wave when she was out front, that one of the moms from school brought over a hand-me-down adaptive toy and asked if they could donate it to her, that another girl, 3 doors down, asked if Sophie could come over for lemonade in the backyard. The swing hadn't changed, but the neighborhood around it had. Not completely, but enough. By the time the official statement from the ADA Compliance Office arrived, confirming an open investigation into the HOA's prior enforcement practices, no one was surprised. The board acknowledged it in a single sentence at the next meeting, then quickly moved on to discuss landscaping budgets and summer safety signage. But everyone knew, and more importantly, everyone remembered. Cheryl's recall vote passed with 83% support. She didn't show up to that meeting, and no one asked why. Her seat was empty when they counted the votes, and empty still when the room cleared out. The gate on Sophie's swing never needed a lock. After everything, the accusations, the votes, the veiled threats, it remained exactly where it began, unchanged, untouched, still standing in the corner of the Vance backyard, surrounded by soft mulch and laughter, just as it was always meant to be. It was late spring now, the kind of weekend morning where the grass still held on to the dew, and the neighborhood was just waking up to the smell of brewing coffee and screen doors creaking open. Sophie was already outside, the gentle arc of the swing gliding beneath the branches overhead. Her hair was tied back with a blue ribbon, her legs dangled loosely in the harness, her smile quiet but full. She wasn't watching the fence. She wasn't worried about who might say something, because she didn't have to be. Adam sat on the porch steps, coffee in hand, eyes on his daughter. He didn't hover. He didn't pace. He just watched her, listened to the breeze and the birds and the occasional squeak of the swing's frame, and let himself believe, for the first time in weeks, that it was finally over. Not because Cheryl had lost her seat, not because the board had apologized, or the violations had stopped, but because the community had chosen a different story to believe in, and this time, it was the right one. The recall letter had gone out quietly. No celebration, no parade, just a simple update posted to the community board. The board has accepted Cheryl Buckley's resignation effective immediately. Thank you to the residents who participated in the recall vote. There were no follow-ups, no posturing, no damage control, just silence, and a neighborhood that slowly began to clean up what had been left behind. The new board drafted a revised policy, one that didn't just acknowledge accessibility, but prioritized it. They included language about reasonable accommodations, visible exceptions, for therapeutic equipment, and a clause requiring sensitivity training for future board members. It passed without a single dissent. Adam didn't attend that vote. He read the minutes from home, and smiled when he saw Sophie's swing referenced by name. In recognition of the events surrounding the Vance family, and the need for inclusive recreation, this policy will now include language affirming the right to adaptive equipment on private property, regardless of aesthetics. It wasn't just a rule change, it was a reversal. A week later, Adam received a letter in the mail, not from the board, but from a neighbor he didn't know well. Inside was a short note. My wife and I moved here 2 years ago. We kept our heads down, watched things quietly. But after what you did, I think maybe next time we'll speak up. Thank you for being louder than most would have dared. Folded with it was a drawing, crayon on construction paper. Sophie, her swing, big sky behind her, the kind of picture that kids make when they feel safe enough to imagine again. Sophie never asked what happened to Cheryl. She never asked why her dad had come in late some nights, or why people had started waving more often on their walks. She didn't care about policies, or HOA votes, or board seats. She only cared that her swing was still there, and that it would still be there tomorrow. That was enough for Adam. He didn't need credit. He didn't want a sign in the yard, or a spot on the board. He just wanted his daughter to fly. And from that day on, whenever someone walked past their backyard, and saw the soft rhythm of that swing moving against the skyline, they didn't see a violation, they saw a promise. That community isn't about conformity, it's about belonging. And belonging, like freedom, should never need permission. Violated the look of the neighborhood. As if joy had to match siding colors to be allowed. He opened his inbox. There it was, time-stamped 4:07 p.m., subject, Notice of Non-Compliance, Recreational Structure. Dear Mr. Vance, you are hereby notified that the recreational swing set structure installed at address is not in compliance with Brookridge Park HOA regulations. He stopped reading. The next morning, Cheryl posted a notice on the neighborhood board. Please remember all external structures require HOA approval. This includes swing sets, tree houses, and recreational installations. We support AO families, while ensuring standards are respected. No names, but everyone knew. Adam's neighbor texted him. They're out of line. Do they even know what it's for? Want me to show up to the next meeting? He didn't respond. Not yet, because this wasn't going to be a shouting match. This wasn't going to be some petty war with printed flyers or sarcastic yard signs. This was his daughter's freedom. And if they wanted a fight over 14 inches of steel, they'd learn the hard way that sometimes the quietest kids have the loudest champions. Adam didn't respond to the HOA's email. He didn't show up at Cheryl Buckley's door, or post a dramatic Facebook rant in the Brookridge Park group. He didn't call the local paper, or knock on his neighbors' doors, even though several had offered to speak up on his behalf. Instead, he got to work. Because if there was one thing he'd learned raising a daughter with cerebral palsy, it was this: emotion makes noise, preparation makes change. He started with the paperwork. The swing had been installed under a city-funded accessibility grant. That meant paperwork, permits, installation records, even contractor logs. He opened his filing cabinet and pulled the folder from the bottom drawer. Inside were signed approvals from the city's adaptive recreation program and zoning office, stamped, initialed, digitally time-stamped. They weren't optional, they were law. Next he printed out the HOA's guidelines in full. Every section, every footnote. He read the entire thing twice. They were clear about playground equipment being subject to approval, but nowhere did it say that ADA-compliant installations were prohibited, and while it cited a 6-foot height limit for decorative structures, it made no mention of therapeutic devices. There was no clause for accessibility, no exceptions, which meant Brookridge Park HOA hadn't written a rule that included kids like Sophie at all, and that omission, that was going to cost them. Adam documented everything. Photos of the swing from multiple angles. A video of Sophie using it, smiling in her harness, as her feet brushed the edge of the mulch bed. He took a picture of the fence from the sidewalk, showing clearly that nothing rose above the line. He printed Cheryl's passive-aggressive message from the community, highlighted the sentence about supporting AO families, then underlined the word all. By Thursday, he had enough. He called Elena Grant, a friend from the local Disability Rights Council. They'd met during a city-run parent panel for inclusive spaces. What do you need? She asked. Advice, he replied. And maybe a witness. He emailed her the documents, the photos, and the compliance letters. She responded within the hour. You don't need a witness, you've got a case. I'm not trying to sue, Adam said. I know, that's why they're going to lose. That night, he drafted a formal response. Not angry, just precise. Dear Brookridge Park HOA, I am writing in response to your non-compliance notice dated date, regarding the adaptive swing installed on my property. As outlined in the attached documents,
This swing was installed with the full approval of the City of Crestview through an ADA accessibility. It is legally permitted, meets all safety requirements, and is classified as therapeutic adaptive equipment. Under federal ADA guidelines, any organization, including homeowners associations, that fails to make reasonable accommodations for individuals with disabilities is in direct violation of civil rights protections. I have included documentation from the city, photographic evidence of compliance, and legal confirmation from the Adaptive Recreation Commission. Unless I receive a written withdrawal of your violation notice within 5 business days, I will forward this file to the Department of Housing and Urban Development and the Office for Civil Rights. He attached the entire packet, printed a hard copy, dropped one in the board's mailbox at the clubhouse, and emailed a digital copy to the entire board, CCing the city's ADA coordinator. By Friday morning, Cheryl hadn't replied, but the HOA Facebook group was lit up with quiet fury. One neighbor posted, "We shouldn't be asking a father to justify a swing for his daughter. We should be ashamed." Another followed with, "I've seen that girl smile on that swing, more than I've seen our president smile in 4 years. And someone else, anonymous, posted a side-by-side image. On the left, Cheryl's message about supporting all families. On the right, a picture of Sophie's swing behind the fence. No caption. Didn't need one. Adam didn't say a word online. He didn't comment, like, or react. He just watched the numbers grow, and quietly prepared for the next HOA meeting, where he would show up with a folder full of receipts, and a room already turning against them. Because this wasn't just about a swing, it was about the kind of community they wanted to be, and who got to decide what belonging looked like. The clubhouse was already full when Adam Vance arrived. Neighbors filled every folding chair, voices low, glances tight. A few nodded as he passed. One woman gave his shoulder a gentle squeeze. No one said much, but he could feel it. The shift, the discomfort that comes when a community realizes it may have stood too quietly for too long. He didn't bring signs or supporters. He didn't print flyers or prepare a speech. All he brought was a manila folder and the truth. Cheryl Buckley stood at the front table in her usual beige blazer, flanked by the rest of the Brookridge Park board. Her voice was even, but strained. "Before we begin tonight's agenda, we'll hear comments related to the recent compliance dispute involving a swing set installed at Lot 19. She didn't say his name, didn't say Sophie. Adam stood. "I'm Adam Vance. I live at Lot 19. I'm the father of the child that swing was built for." There was a beat of silence. Then he stepped forward and handed a copy of the packet to the board. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. This swing was installed through the City of Crestview's Adaptive Recreation Program. It's ADA compliant, medically recommended, and permitted. The materials were approved. The height meets safety code, and it's not visible from the street. He paused,